My son forgot to hang up the phone. I shouldn't have heard what came next, but I did. It's time to put him in a home. I heard a woman's voice say, "He's a burden." Something inside me, something I didn't even know was still alive, snapped clean in two. I didn't confront them. Not then. Instead, I acted. The very next morning, I called a realtor and sold the house for $890,000 in cash. This house, my wife's dream, my sanctuary, was gone in a single pen stroke. A week later, when Marcus and Lena came back from their business trip, they were smiling, hand in hand, probably already imagining the life they'd live with my money. But when they reached my door, their smiles turned to confusion. Their keys didn't fit. The lock was new, and there on the front step, I'd left a single envelope. Inside, a note, just 2 sentences. Enough to make Marcus turn pale and Lena start screaming before the words had even left her lips. But that was only the beginning. I knew them well enough to know they wouldn't leave it at that. This was going to be a war, and I had just fired the first shot. The phone rang that night, just as I was scraping the last cold bites of dinner from my plate. Meatloaf. My late wife, Margaret, had perfected the recipe over 35 years, but no matter how many times I tried, mine never tasted the same. I shuffled into the living room and glanced at the caller ID. A rare small smile crept across my face. "Hey Dad, how are you holding up?" Clara. My only daughter. Her voice still carried that gentle warmth that made my chest ache with a mixture of pride and unbearable loneliness. I sank into Margaret's old leather recliner, the one smoothed over from years of her evening reading. "You know me, kiddo. Just finished dinner. Was about to put on the news." I didn't mention that it was 3-day-old leftovers. I didn't mention that I'd spent the last hour staring at Margaret's photograph on the mantel, whispering to her like she was still there. "Are you eating enough?" Clara's voice carried a note of worry. "I showed you how to order groceries from the app. You remember that, right?" "I'm eating plenty," I said softly, though my throat caught. "Though I had a little scare yesterday. Forgot to turn off the burner under my coffee pot. Good thing I smelled it before it got worse." There was a pause on the line. I could picture her frowning, the way she always did when she worried. That little crease between her brows, Margaret's exact expression. "Dad," Clara said carefully, "maybe we should think about getting someone to come check on you. Just a few hours a day." "Clara, I'm fine," I said, forcing a lightness into my voice. "Marcus thinks so too." "How's your conference?" I asked quickly, trying to change the subject. "We're in Phoenix," she said. "Marcus has been doing most of the meetings. I've just been sitting through these endless talks about digital marketing." She laughed, but it was thin, brittle. "I should go. We've got dinner with some potential investors." "Of course, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too, Dad. Take care of yourself, okay?" I heard the click, but then, rustling. The call hadn't disconnected yet. I started to hang up when I heard Clara's voice again, but it was different this time, flat, practical. "Marcus, he forgot the stove again. We can't keep pretending he's fine. What if he burns the place down?" Ice filled my chest. Marcus's voice followed, calm and clinical. "It's time, Clara. He's not safe there anymore. The house is worth almost $1 million now. We could sell it, get him somewhere decent, and finally buy that place in Boulder." Clara laughed. "Oh Marcus, you should have seen him tonight. So grateful just to hear from me. He has no idea we're planning this." The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. I stared at Margaret's photo. Her eyes seemed to pierce through me, sad, knowing, almost warning me. The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the hallway, counting the seconds of a life I suddenly realized wasn't mine anymore. Outside, the wind rattled the first blossoms of spring against the window, a season of new beginnings, and I decided mine would start tonight. I sat there for a long time that night, staring at Margaret's photo, the rage inside me slowly cooling into something sharper, something with edges. That's when I remembered the box. It was shoved in the back of the closet in my study. 20 years of financial records, meticulously saved because Margaret had always insisted, "You never know when you might need them." I pulled the box out and set it on the kitchen table, the same table where I'd once paid bills with her sitting across from me, steaming mugs of coffee between us. Inside were the pages of my life. University of Colorado tuition receipts, every semester carefully filed. $48,000, earned shift by shift, blister by blister. I remembered the nights I'd come home with concrete dust in my hair and plaster under my fingernails, my whole body aching from double shifts. Margaret would be waiting, warm coffee in hand, and she'd stand behind me, rubbing my shoulders, as I did the math over and over. How to keep the lights on, how to keep our daughter in school. "Roy, you're working yourself into the ground," she'd said one night, watching me with worried eyes as I scribbled numbers on the back of an envelope. "She deserves better than we ever had, Ellen," I'd said without looking up. "She's smart enough for anything. She just needs a chance." Margaret had kissed the top of my head. Her voice had been soft but full of warning. "Just don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful." I should have listened. God help me, I should have listened, because I gave her everything. I flipped through more papers. The wedding receipts, still paper clipped together after all these years. $32,000. For one day, I could still hear the argument in my head, me insisting we could afford 5,000, maybe 8 if we tightened our belts. But Caitlin had cried. Not just cried, sobbed. She'd talked about her dream wedding, about the photos she'd looked at since she was 12, about how this was the only wedding she'd ever have, and like a fool, I'd caved. I'd worked weekends for 6 straight months, installing hardwood floors for a contractor friend who paid me cash under the table. I'd dragged my body home long after dark, knees screaming, back on fire. "Daddy, you're the best father in the world," she'd whispered to me during the father-daughter dance, her head resting against my shoulder, her white gown rustling against my rented tuxedo. I could still feel the weight of her then, the way she smelled of roses and hairspray. "I'll never forget this," she'd said, but she had. Oh, she had, because now, here we were, and she was laughing about selling the house Margaret and I had built together, laughing about putting me away like I was some broken piece of furniture. I closed the box of records, my decision hardening like wet cement in my chest. I wasn't going to let them take anything else from me. Not my home, not my dignity, not the last piece of Margaret I had left. They thought I was too old, too slow, too weak to fight back. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. The crickets had begun their nightly chorus in the garden Margaret planted. The garden I still tended, though the weeds seemed to creep in faster these days. Their sound, once comforting, now felt sharp, like tiny needles pricking the edges of my thoughts. Something cold and immovable settled in my chest, replacing the last fragile warmth I'd felt when I first heard Clara's voice that evening. My hands, calloused and worn from a lifetime of building homes for other people, curled into fists on my lap. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a problem to be managed, an expense to be contained, a loose end to be tied up before it frayed. They were already spending money that wasn't theirs, already picturing their new life without me in it, living in my grave, smiling over the ashes of the home Margaret and I built nail by nail. But I wasn't in my grave yet, and I wasn't nearly as broken as they believed. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark. Margaret's photograph on the end table seemed to watch me. Her kind eyes unreadable now. Was it disappointment? Sorrow? Or maybe just that terrible wisdom of the dead? The knowledge that life can shatter without warning. When I finally stood, my legs were unsteady, but something inside me had already locked into place. I reached for the lamp, and the living room was bathed in a soft, warm glow. I looked around, really looked, at the room we had built together. Every piece of furniture had a story. The burgundy sofa where Clara used to curl up to do homework, chewing the end of her pencil. The coffee table I had built from leftover oak planks, sanding it smooth late at night while she played at my feet. The framed photos of birthdays, Christmas mornings, graduations, the evidence of a life we had sacrificed everything to give her. And now she wanted to take it all away. I walked into the kitchen and pulled open the drawer where I kept years of old papers and receipts. My fingers found the folder without even looking. It was muscle memory. I'd reached for it so many times over the years, always to prove something, to calculate something, to make sure the numbers worked. Inside were reminders of everything they had forgotten. The tuition receipts from the University of Colorado, $48,000 over 4 years. I could still taste the concrete dust in my mouth from those double shifts, still feel the sting of plaster in my hair as I came home long after dark. Margaret would be there waiting, coffee ready, hands warm as she rubbed my aching shoulders while I sat at this very table, trying to figure out how to pay for another semester. "Roy, you're working yourself to death," she had said one night, her voice low but worried. "She's smarter than both of us combined." I'd replied, "She deserves a shot at anything she wants. She just needs the chance." Margaret had kissed my head and said words I would never forget. "Just don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful." But that's exactly what I had done. The wedding receipts were there too, $32,000 for one day. I had told Clara we could afford $5,000, maybe $8,000 if we stretched, but she had cried, real tears about wanting her dream wedding, so I had given in. I'd worked weekends for 6 months, putting in hardwood floors for a contractor friend who paid me cash under the table. I'd worked until my knees ached so badly I could barely climb the stairs, and I'd done it with a smile because I wanted her to have her moment. I could still hear her whisper during the father-daughter dance, her head resting against my shoulder. "Daddy, you're the best father in the world. I'll never forget this." But she had forgotten. Just like she'd forgotten who co-signed her first car loan when her credit was too low. Just like she'd forgotten who pulled every string he had to get her that marketing job when she was unemployed for 8 months and on the verge of losing her apartment. I found the bank statements from 2 years ago, when Marcus had been fired from his financial advisor job, for reasons I still didn't know, and they never offered to explain. They'd moved in temporarily, just until he got back on his feet. I never asked for rent. I paid the bigger grocery bills, the higher utilities. I'd even driven Marcus to interviews when their car broke down, and when he finally found work again, I celebrated with them as though I had landed the job myself. "Roy is like a father to me," Marcus had said at their last barbecue, his arm slung around my shoulder while Clara smiled. I'd been proud then. I'd been proud to be the man who took care of his family, no matter what it cost me. But standing there now, staring at the anniversary dinner bill I'd paid last month, $200 for steaks and wine because Marcus said they deserved to celebrate, the pride twisted into something darker. The car repair I'd covered, $3,000 for a new transmission on Marcus's BMW, money that had cleaned out the last of my emergency fund, now felt like a cruel joke. I went upstairs, the house quiet, except for the creak of the steps. I passed Caitlin's old room, still painted in the soft yellow she'd chosen for her 16th birthday, still cluttered with high school photos and mementos that I'd never had the heart to take down. I stepped into the master bedroom, the room Margaret had taken her last breath in, and for a moment I just stood there. Her jewelry box still sat on the dresser. Her reading glasses were still folded by the lamp. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the original deed to the house. My hands shook as I read the line. Roy and Margaret Hayes, purchased 1999. No liens, no co-signers, just us, my name only now. Everything they were scheming over, everything they were already counting as theirs. It was mine, standing in that room, surrounded by the last remnants of my wife. Something inside me solidified. The hurt was still there, sharp as glass, but beneath it a harder layer formed, like steel cooling into shape. They thought I was finished. They thought I was too weak, too grateful, too dependent to stop them. But I was about to remind them exactly who I was. I went to my desk, opened the drawer, and found the business card I'd kept for 3 years. Todd Fisher, real estate attorney. Margaret had insisted we speak with him after her diagnosis. Just in case, it was time to speak with him again. The next morning I walked through my house like a stranger, but this time I didn't just see home. I saw assets, numbers, leverage. I saw it, the way Clara and Marcus must have seen it. Square footage, market value, untapped equity. But to me it was more than numbers. Every granite countertop, every piece of molding, every hardwood floorboard was a memory I had carved into existence. I remembered Christmas morning when Clara had taken her first steps right here on this kitchen floor, Margaret scooping her up with tears streaming down her face. This is what we built for her. Margaret had whispered. And I had. I'd built this life for her. And now, I would make sure I was the one who decided what happened to it. The crickets outside had begun their nightly chorus, a soft and rhythmic sound rising from the garden that Lillian had planted all those years ago. The same garden I still tended every spring as if she might step outside barefoot and admire the blooms. But tonight, that familiar sound didn't soothe me. Instead, something cold and jagged settled deep in my chest, pushing out the warmth I'd felt just moments earlier hearing my daughter's voice. My hands, rough, calloused from 40 years of building homes that were never my own, slowly curled into fists against my knees. They thought I was done. They thought I was a confused old man, ready to be shuffled out of sight, tucked away somewhere where I wouldn't be a nuisance. They thought they could manage me, sell off my house, spend my money while I sat quietly in some sterile room staring at a TV I didn't care about. But I wasn't dead yet, and I wasn't nearly as confused as they believed. I sat there in the dark for what felt like hours, Lillian's face watching me from the silver frame on the end table. Her eyes, always calm and steady, seemed to be asking me what I was going to do about this. The house felt different now, heavier, almost suffocating, as if the walls had heard my daughter's words and were holding their breath, waiting for my answer. When I finally stood, my legs felt unsteady, like I'd aged another 10 years sitting there. I switched on the lamp, flooding the room with warm, golden light. My gaze swept across the living room we had built, piece by piece, over decades. The burgundy sofa where Marissa used to curl up to do her homework. The coffee table I'd built in the garage one winter, sanding it smooth while she played with her dolls at my feet. I walked into the kitchen, opening the drawer where I kept old receipts and bills. My fingers knew exactly where to go. I found the folder, heavy with years of sacrifices, each slip of paper a piece of my life I'd traded for hers. University tuition receipts, $48,000 over 4 years still there like relics. I remembered the nights I came home with concrete dust in my hair, plaster under my fingernails, Lillian waiting with coffee as I sat at this very table figuring out how to make numbers work that didn't want to work. She deserves better than we had, Hank, Lillian had said one night, her hand resting gently on my back as I scribbled figures on an envelope. She's smart enough for anything. She is, I'd said, and I'll make sure she gets there. I'd promised that with every bone in my body, and I'd kept that promise, no matter what it cost me. Even the wedding receipts were in that folder. $32,000 for one single day. I had told Marissa we could afford 5, maybe 8 if we stretched. But she cried, real tears about wanting her dream wedding, and so I worked weekends for 6 months installing hardwood floors under the table for a contractor friend. Daddy, you're the best father in the world, she had whispered during our dance, her head resting against my shoulder, her wedding dress rustling against my rented tuxedo. I had believed her when she said she'd never forget, but she had forgotten who co-signed her first car loan when her credit wasn't good enough, forgotten who called every contact he had to get her that marketing job after 8 months of unemployment. I found the bank statements from 2 years ago, the ones that told another story, the story of when Evan, her husband, had lost his financial advisor job. They had moved in with me, just until they got back on their feet. I never charged rent. I paid the higher utility bills. I stocked the fridge for 3 adults when I had been used to feeding only myself. Henry's the most generous man in Colorado, Evan would say to his friends, clapping me on the shoulder at barbecues. I'm so lucky to have married into this family. And I believed him. I wore that pride like a badge of honor. But they never moved out. They never paid me back. They never even brought it up. I thought about the $3,000 I spent last month fixing Evan's BMW transmission, draining the emergency fund Lillian and I had built over a decade. I thought about the anniversary dinner, $200 at that overpriced steakhouse, because they deserved to celebrate. Walking upstairs, I passed every piece of my life displayed in photographs. Lillian smiling in her sun hat, Marissa at her high school graduation, the 3 of us standing in front of this house the day we paid it off. I stepped into the bedroom that hadn't changed since Lillian passed 2 years ago. Her jewelry box was still there, her reading glasses folded neatly beside the lamp. I opened the drawer where I kept our important papers and pulled out the deed. Henry and Lillian Ward, purchased 1999. No liens, no cosigners, mine alone now. I stood there for a long time holding that paper. The hurt was still sharp, like broken glass, but under it something else began to form, something hard, cold, unyielding. They wanted to sell my life's work. They thought I was too old, too broken, too grateful for their scraps of attention to fight back. But they were about to find out that I still had some fight left. I looked at Lillian's photo on the nightstand and heard her voice as clear as if she were standing there. Don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful. Well, Lillian, our daughter, had forgotten, but she was about to remember. I walked into my office and pulled out a business card I hadn't touched in 3 years. Todd Fisher, real estate attorney. Lillian had made me meet him after her diagnosis, to get our affairs in order. It was time to call him again. The next morning, I walked through my house like a stranger. Not a home anymore, but an asset. Square footage, market value, sale potential. I ran my hand along the granite countertop, tracing the veins of gold that caught the light, the ones Lillian had insisted on. I remembered every hour I spent installing it myself after work, too broke to hire a contractor. I climbed the stairs to Marissa's old room. The soft yellow walls still held her teenage laughter, her photographs, her trophies. The small desk I had built with my own hands was still there, perfectly fitted under the window. And then I stood in the master bedroom, the hardest room of all. Lillian's bookmark still sat on page 247 of the book she'd never finish. Her water glass still waited on the nightstand. This was what they wanted to erase, but I wasn't about to let them. Years of working as a construction engineer had trained me to be patient, precise, and methodical before making any major move. Tonight, for the first time in my life, those same skills weren't about building someone else's dream. They were about tearing mine apart piece by piece. I sat in my office long after the sun had gone down, the glow of my computer screen washing the room in pale blue light. My search history read like the beginning of a heist: top real estate agents in Cherry Creek, fastest cash buyers in Denver, best lawyers for quick property transactions. I compared agent profiles like I used to compare structural steel suppliers back in the day: numbers, success rates, timelines, and results. Cherry Hills, Highlands Ranch, University Hills. I scanned neighborhoods where homes sold for the kind of money Marissa and Evan were already counting in their heads. I imagined them sitting on some realtor's couch, flipping through glossy brochures, planning out their new life while I rotted quietly in some facility. One name kept coming up: Brian Connolly, 43 years old, averages 18 days from listing to closing. His profile photo showed a sharp-dressed man with a disarming smile, confident eyes, and the stance of someone who knew he was very good at his job. His reviews weren't just positive, they were glowing, almost reverent. Brian sold our house in 6 days. Cash buyer lined up within 48 hours. Smoothest process ever. No complications. That was what I needed. No complications. I stared at his phone number glowing on my screen, the cursor hovering over it. This was it. The moment that would set everything into motion. Once I made this call, there would be no going back. No more pretending to be the grateful, manageable old man everyone thought I was. I glanced at Lillian's photograph on my desk. Her eyes, forever caught in that moment of soft laughter, seemed to be asking me, "Henry, are you sure about this?" And for the first time in years, I felt sure. More sure than I'd felt since the day we buried her. I dialed the number with steady fingers. Brian Connolly, Connolly Real Estate. How can I help you? Mr. Connolly, my name is Henry Ward, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I'm interested in selling my house. Quickly. How fast can these things happen? There was a short pause, then his tone turned sharp and professional. Well, Mr. Ward, that depends on several factors, but with the right property and pricing strategy, I've closed in as little as 10 days with cash buyers. 10 days. My heart thudded against my ribs like a hammer striking plywood. Absolutely. Denver's market is red hot right now. Well-maintained properties in established neighborhoods are getting snapped up faster than I can list them. Can you tell me a bit about your house? I looked around my kitchen, suddenly seeing it through a stranger's eyes. 2-story, 3,400 square feet, built in '99, Cherry Creek area. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, well maintained. Did most of the work myself over the years. Brian's voice perked with interest. That's exactly the kind of property I have investors waiting on. Original owner, good bones, prime neighborhood. Those are premium selling points. Would you like me to come by and do a property assessment? How soon? I can be there this afternoon if you're available. Say 3 o'clock. I checked the time. Just past noon. 3 o'clock works. Let me give you the address. After I hung up, the silence of the house was deafening. I sat there for a moment, my hand still on the receiver, letting the magnitude of what I'd just set in motion sink in. In 3 hours, a stranger would walk through the house Lillian and I had built with our bare hands. He would look past the memories and history, and assign it a number my daughter and her husband could never touch once I was finished. I stood up and began to clean, not just a quick tidy, the deep, obsessive kind of cleaning Lillian had insisted on whenever company came over. The house needed to shine. The bay window got dusted until the glass caught the sunlight like crystal. The throw pillows were straightened, the hardwood floors polished until I could see my reflection in them. But this cleaning felt different. It wasn't hospitality, it was preparation. It was the ritual before an execution. At exactly 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I smoothed down my shirt, inhaling deeply. The faint scent of Lillian's lavender sachets drifted out from the linen closet, softening my nerves for a single heartbeat. My hand gripped the brass doorknob I had installed myself 15 years ago, my knuckles pale. Beyond this door waited either my salvation or my damnation. I turned the handle and opened the door. Brian Connolly stood on my porch, every bit as polished and professional as his profile picture suggested. Early 40s, clean-shaven, sharp suit, leather portfolio under one arm, tablet in the other. He had the posture of a man who had seen hundreds of houses, but when he stepped inside, his eyebrows shot up. "Wow," he breathed, taking in the entryway. His eyes traveled up the crown molding I'd installed by hand, then down to the hardwood floors Lillian and I had spent weeks picking out. "Mr. Ward, this is exactly what I was hoping for." I watched him move slowly through the house, his gaze assessing but also admiring. He paused at the bay window, where the afternoon light poured through just as it had when Lillian used to sit there with her tea. He admired the open flow of the living room and dining room, the very wall I had torn down and rebuilt with my own hands to create that open space. For a moment, it didn't feel like a real estate assessment. It felt like someone was taking inventory of my life. Brian's admiration wasn't fake. I could see it in the way his brow lifted slightly, the way his fingertips traced the trim without a hint of forced politeness. "You weren't exaggerating, Mr. Ward," he said, pulling out his tablet and starting to photograph the entryway. "These hardwood floors, original. Installed them myself in 2001, I said, my voice quiet but steady. 3/4-inch solid oak. I wanted something that would last forever. My wife, she wanted it to feel warm. Real wood, not laminate." Brian nodded, crouching slightly to get a better shot of the grain. "It shows. This is what buyers drool over. Real craftsmanship. You don't see much of this anymore." A small bitter part of me was proud, despite everything that had led to this day. I had built this house with my own hands, one project at a time, sacrificing weekends, holidays and sleep. I could still remember Lillian handing me a mug of coffee as I sanded floorboards late into the night, smiling that tired but proud smile she had when she knew I was working myself past exhaustion for our future. Brian stepped into the kitchen, running his palm along the granite countertops like a jeweler inspecting a diamond. "Custom install, every inch," I said, my throat tightening. She picked the pattern, said the gold veins looked like threads of sunlight. Took me 3 weekends to get those measurements right. Brian didn't rush me, just kept taking notes, photographing the cabinets, checking outlets and fixtures with the calm focus of a man who had done this 1,000 times but still cared about the details. "I have to tell you, Mr. Ward," he said finally, lowering his tablet for a moment. "In 15 years of doing this job, I rarely see a home this well maintained. It's obvious you've cared for every square foot." "I was an engineer," I said, the words surprising even me. "I believe in building things right the first time. It shows," he said, his tone sincere. We moved into the living room. He stood there for a moment, taking in the open floor plan, the crown molding, the built-in shelves I had measured and cut by hand. "This bay window," he said, running his hand along the smooth trim. "That's custom." I swallowed hard. "Built it for my wife. She wanted a reading nook." For a split second, I could see her there, Lillian in the afternoon light, hair falling over one shoulder, glasses perched on her nose, a mug of tea steaming beside her. My chest tightened, but I forced the image away. Brian's tablet chimed softly as he pulled up comparable listings. "I need to show you something," he said, scrolling to a set of photos. "Properties like yours, in this condition, in this neighborhood, have been selling for between $850 and $920. Given the custom work, the condition, and this floor plan, I'd recommend listing at $890,000. It'll move quickly at that price, maybe even attract multiple offers." I sank into Lillian's old chair by the window, the number echoing in my head like church bells. $890,000, almost $1 million. "That much?" I asked quietly. Brian smiled, the kind of smile people have when they know they're delivering good news. "Mr. Ward, you're sitting on a gold mine. These kinds of homes don't hit the market often, and when they do, they don't stay there long." My mind flickered back to the voices I'd heard just days ago. Marissa calling me sweet, Evan casually discussing where they'd put me, what they'd sell, what they'd keep. I could almost hear them counting this number, already planning which SUV or vacation this house would buy. "I actually have an investment group that's been looking for exactly this kind of property," Brian continued. "Established neighborhood, move-in ready, minimal work needed. They pay cash, no financing delays, no appraisal contingencies that could blow up the deal." "Cash?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. "Cash," he confirmed. "Fast, clean, simple. We could have you under contract within 48 hours, close in 10 business days. 10 business days. Marissa and Evan would be back from Phoenix in 8. "Why so fast?" I asked, suspicious despite my racing pulse. Brian's lips curved into a small knowing smile. "Because they can. They want inventory, and a property like this is exactly what they're waiting for." I looked around the living room, the fireplace where Marissa had once hung her kindergarten stocking, the spot where her dollhouse had stood, the corner where Lillian had fallen asleep on Sunday afternoons, while I read the paper beside her. "And how long would I have to move out?" I asked, my voice sounding far away. "Standard is 30 days after closing," Brian said, "but they're flexible. We can negotiate extra time if you need it." I nodded slowly, the decision forming like concrete setting in my chest. I thought of Marissa's soft, practiced voice, calling me sweet, while plotting to sell the life I'd built. I thought of Evan's hand on my shoulder, smiling while draining my savings. "Let's do it," I said. For a moment, Brian's professional mask slipped, replaced by the grin of a man who had just found buried treasure. "Excellent choice, Mr. Ward. Let me make some calls right now." I sat silently as he dialed, listening to him describe my home with enthusiasm, his words spilling into the air like the ringing of a starting bell. "Cherry Creek area, original owner, immaculate condition, custom work throughout. This is the one you've been waiting for." He wasn't just talking to them, he was talking to me. This was the start of something neither Marissa nor Evan would see coming. 2 hours later, Eddie's van pulled into my driveway. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with tattooed arms and a workman's confidence. "Whole house?" he asked, after I explained. "Front, back, garage, basement. Every point of entry," I said. He nodded. No questions asked, and got to work. I stood in the kitchen while he moved through the house with the quiet precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The sound of his drill biting into metal felt almost ceremonial, like a priest sealing a tomb. Each new deadbolt was another line drawn between my past and my future. When Eddie was done, he handed me a small plastic bag with the old lock cylinders inside. "You want me to toss these?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I'll keep them." He left me with 3 new keys on a shiny brass ring. I turned them in my palm, feeling their sharp new edges. The house was mine again. Not legally, not technically, but in the way that mattered. Caitlin and Jeremy could still call it their childhood home. They just wouldn't be able to walk inside. That night, I sat in Ellen's reading chair with a glass of bourbon, watching the moonlight pour through the bay window. I could almost hear her laugh, that soft, knowing sound she made whenever I finally stood up for myself, after letting someone push me too far. "About time, Roy," I imagined her saying. 3 days later, their SUV pulled into the driveway. I was sitting on the porch, calm as the sunrise. Caitlin got out first, smiling in relief, until she noticed the locks. She tried her key. It didn't turn. She tried the back door. Same result. "Dad," she called, her voice already sharpening. I stood, slow and steady, and handed her an envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with the closing statement and a note in my neat engineer's handwriting. "You said I was a burden. Burdens get carried. This one just walked away on his own. The house is sold. The money is mine. Don't worry about me. I've got plans." Jeremy's face went red. Caitlin looked like she might cry. I didn't wait to see which one came first. I got in my truck, started the engine, and backed out of the driveway without another word. In the rearview mirror, I saw Caitlin pounding on the locked door, Jeremy shouting something I couldn't hear. I drove away, the weight on my chest finally gone. By the time I hit I-25, the sun was setting, painting the sky gold, Ellen's color. For the first time since her funeral, I wasn't just surviving, I was moving forward. Saturday passed slowly. I walked the apartment complex's small courtyard, nodding politely at the other residents. Some of them smiled with that familiar senior camaraderie, but I wasn't ready to join their morning coffee circles or bingo games. Not yet. I spent most of the day setting up my new life, arranging my documents in the small desk drawer, hanging Ellen's jewelry box key by the nightstand, and placing our wedding photo where I'd see it first thing every morning. Sunday morning, I drove past Maple Street one last time. The house stood there as perfect as ever, sunlight glinting off the bay window, the new locks gleaming silver in the daylight. It didn't feel like mine anymore, and that was the point. Monday arrived bright and crisp. At 9 a.m., I sat across from David Morrison at Colorado Community Bank. He was younger than I expected, perhaps late 30s, with the polished manners of someone used to managing wealth for people who rarely smiled. "Mr. Hayes," he said, sliding a set of forms across the desk, "we can create a private client account with full discretion. Funds will be protected under your name alone. Do you wish to add any beneficiaries?" I hesitated, thinking of Caitlin, of Jeremy, of their voices calling me a burden. "No beneficiaries," I said finally. "This is for me." David nodded, unfazed. By 10:15 a.m., the transfer was complete. I walked out of the bank with nothing more than a checkbook, a debit card, and nearly $900,000 secured where no one could touch it. That afternoon, I called Brian Connor. "Brian," I said, "I'll be vacating the property completely by tomorrow. Please let the buyers know they may take possession early if they'd like." "Of course, Mr. Hayes. I'll notify them." "Everything all right?" "Everything's perfect," I said, and meant it. 2 days later, Caitlin and Jeremy's SUV pulled into the driveway just as I'd imagined. I was sitting on the porch steps, a man at peace. Caitlin smiled at first, but the smile faltered when she noticed the new locks. She hurried up the walk, fishing in her purse for her key. "It didn't fit. Dad, what's going on?" Jeremy tried the garage door, found it locked too, and turned on me. "Where are the keys, Roy?" I stood and handed Caitlin a plain envelope. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was the closing statement from the title company, and a single-page letter in my handwriting. "Caitlin, Jeremy, you made it clear that my future was not mine to decide. You planned a life for me without asking what I wanted. So I made my own plan. The house is sold. The money is mine. Don't worry, I'm fine. You don't need to carry this burden anymore. Consider this my retirement gift to myself." Caitlin's lip trembled. Jeremy swore under his breath. Neither of them spoke as I walked to my truck, keys jingling in my hand. At the end of the block, I stopped and looked back one last time. The house, my house, glowed in the late afternoon light. For the first time since Ellen's death, I wasn't waiting for life to happen to me. I had made a choice. I drove back to Sunset Manor as the sky turned gold, feeling lighter than I had in years. My new apartment was waiting, small but full of possibility. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, sat by the window and raised it toward Ellen's photo. "Here's to us, honey," I said softly. "I think you'd be proud." For the first time since she'd been gone, I slept through the night. Saturday morning felt heavier than most, though the sky outside was bright. I brewed coffee in the tiny, unfamiliar kitchenette, the smell comforting but bittersweet. Methodically, I unpacked my few belongings. Maria's jewelry box now sat on the dresser like a quiet ghost of the life I'd lost. My engineering awards, once proudly displayed in the family room, now sat in a single row on a cheap apartment bookshelf. Our wedding photo, the one where I had hair and she had the brightest smile in the room, sat beside the bed where I now slept alone. The space was new, but it carried the hollow silence of a place that had never known her. I drove to the grocery store and bought food for one. Small portions, simple meals, nothing that required the kind of careful cooking Maria had loved. At checkout, the young clerk, a kind-eyed man with an easy grin, asked if I was new to the area. "Just moved in," I told him, forcing a smile. "Starting fresh." The words felt strange, as if spoken by someone else. Sunday morning brought a quiet discovery, a little coffee shop tucked away on a corner just 3 blocks from my apartment. Brews and Views. It smelled of espresso beans and cinnamon rolls, the kind of place Maria would have adored. The barista, a young woman named Ava with streaks of purple in her hair, made me a cup of coffee exactly how I liked it. Strong, no sugar. She smiled as she handed me the cup. "You're new around here," she said softly. More observation than question. "Yeah," I replied. "Just a retired engineer looking for a quieter life." She nodded approvingly. "Then you found the right neighborhood. Around here people like quiet." I sat by the window, watching people walk dogs, push strollers, and live out the kind of easy Sunday mornings Maria and I once treasured. Instead of sadness, something unexpected welled up inside me. Not despair, not grief, something far more dangerous. Anticipation. Monday morning, I put on my best suit and drove to Colorado Heritage Bank. The man who greeted me, Daniel Porter, was younger than I expected. Maybe mid-40s, but he carried the calm confidence of someone used to handling people's futures. "Mr. Carter," he said warmly, shaking my hand. "What brings you to Colorado Heritage Bank today?" "I recently sold my house," I said evenly. "I want to put my money somewhere that values people over fees." He smiled knowingly. "That's exactly what we specialize in. Tell me what you need." I told him everything, not the emotional story, but the facts. Widower, sold the family home, needed secure banking with easy access. Daniel didn't push. He asked just enough questions to get the job done. "We can wire the funds today," he assured me. "Everything should be cleared by Wednesday." I'd also recommend our premium package, better security and fraud protection, given the amount. I nodded. I wanted security. I wanted control. I signed the documents with steady hands, and just like that, I was customer number 502814, with access to nearly $900,000. Money my daughter Claire and her husband Mark would never touch. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in a strange, careful rhythm. Morning coffee at Brews and Views. Ava remembered my order now. Afternoon walks through the park nearby where older men fed pigeons and nodded politely, as if we were part of the same quiet club. Then Wednesday afternoon, the call came. "Mr. Carter," Daniel said, "your funds are fully cleared. Your account is active." I hung up, staring around my little apartment. Maria's photo watched me from the nightstand. For the first time since she died, I felt something like power in my chest, not grief, not anger, control. That night, I sat in the one chair in my apartment, not Maria's reading chair, not the recliner where I had overheard Claire and Mark plotting to put me in a nursing home, just a plain chair in a plain room, and I smiled. Then I opened my laptop and typed mini surveillance cameras. Dozens of options filled the screen, from cheap, obvious security cameras to high-end devices hidden in everyday objects. My engineer's mind clicked into focus. After 30 minutes of research, I found what I needed: a wireless mini camera disguised as a phone charger, Wi-Fi enabled, motion activated, 12-hour battery life, crystal clear video. Most importantly, live streaming directly to my phone. I paid extra for expedited shipping, $149 plus $40 rush fee. 2 weeks ago, I would have hesitated. Now, it felt like a bargain for what I was about to do. Next came the note, the message that would shatter Claire and Mark's smug confidence when they found their keys no longer worked. The first draft was too bitter, dripping with rage. The second was too cold, almost businesslike. The third, yes, the third was perfect, calm, measured, devastating. I wrote it in the careful handwriting Maria always admired. Dear Claire and Mark, if you are reading this, my plan worked. I heard your phone conversation about putting me in a nursing home, about how much you'd make selling my house. That house has been sold. The money is safe in my new account, where it will stay. I've moved somewhere I am appreciated, not tolerated. Don't worry about me. Worry about where you will live. Your belongings are stored at Denver Moving and Storage on Kefax Avenue. You have 30 days to collect them before storage fees begin. I gave you everything I had for 42 years. You repaid me by planning to throw me away. I hope this lesson was worth the cost. Love, Dad. Thursday morning, the FedEx truck pulled up. I unboxed the camera like a child opening a Christmas gift, tested every feature, and grinned when I saw the crystal clear feed on my phone. Thursday afternoon, I returned to my old house for the last time. My hands shook slightly as I unlocked the garage and stepped inside. The air still smelled like home. Lemon oil on the furniture, Maria's lavender sachets faintly lingering in the hallway. But new smells, new sights reminded me whose house this had become. Claire and Mark's suitcases by the stairs, their mail scattered on the counter. They had already begun taking over. I positioned the hidden camera in the front hall outlet, angled perfectly to catch their faces when they walked in. Through my phone, I saw everything, the entire entryway, and the spot where my note now hung at eye level. Then I stood in the living room one last time, resting my hand on the mantel where Maria's photo once stood. It's done, sweetheart, I whispered. Justice served. I locked the door with my new key, stepped outside, and tested the live feed one last time. Perfect. By the time I drove back to my apartment, the adrenaline in my veins had turned to something sharper, colder. Friday was coming, and so were Claire and Mark. The motion detector was armed, the battery fully charged, and my phone sat in my hand like a live wire. Every part of me was alert, ready for the moment Caitlin and Mark realized their keys no longer worked. In the stillness of my apartment, I could see their fate waiting on the screen like the final scene of a play. The timestamp read 6:30 p.m. Thursday evening. Tomorrow my daughter and her husband would return from their trip, probably laughing, probably dreaming about their future with money that never belonged to them. But this time their smiles wouldn't last. I barely slept that night, but when dawn broke, it brought no fatigue, only the electric anticipation of a man about to witness justice unfold. My coffee tasted richer than it had in months, every sip sharpening my focus. The little apartment, once suffocating, felt almost like a command center. I sat in my chair, phone in hand, the live feed showing the empty doorway of my old home. By 4:30 p.m., my heart had settled into a steady, dangerous rhythm. I knew their schedule better than they did. Caitlin hated sitting in traffic. She always left Phoenix by noon sharp. Mark drove like a man afraid of the police, never a mile over the limit. That meant they'd be pulling into the driveway any minute. I glanced at Maria's photo on the nightstand, her smile warm even now. I hope you understand this, I whispered. They left me no choice. 5:15 p.m. My phone vibrated in my hand. Motion detected. I tapped the screen, and there it was, the black SUV pulling into the driveway just as I'd predicted. My pulse thudded in my ears as I watched Caitlin step out first, stretching, brushing back her hair with casual ease. Mark climbed out on the other side, already pulling their luggage from the trunk. They moved like conquerors coming home to claim their spoils. Then came the moment I had waited for. Caitlin walked to the front door, pulled out her keys, and slipped one into the lock. The key didn't turn. Her frown was immediate, sharp. She tried again, harder this time, jiggling the key. Nothing. "That's weird," she muttered. Her voice came through my phone speaker, oddly intimate, like I was standing right beside her. Mark stepped up, frowning. "Let me check the back." I watched him vanish around the side of the house, the camera catching Caitlin's growing frustration as she kept working the lock. 3 minutes later, Mark returned, his face tight with alarm. Back doors locked too, and the garage remotes dead. His voice had a thin edge of panic that made me smile. "That doesn't make any sense," Caitlin said, shaking her head. "Dad doesn't even know a locksmith." Mark crouched, inspecting the lock closely. "These are brand new. Someone changed them. This isn't an accident." Caitlin's hand was shaking as she fished out her phone. "I'm calling Dad." She dialed the house line, the one I had disconnected 3 days ago. After a few rings, her expression crumpled. No answer, not even voicemail. "Try his cell," Mark said. "He doesn't have a cell phone," Caitlin snapped, her voice cracking with real fear. Mark tried the windows next, desperation replacing his earlier calm. "That one's unlocked," he said finally. "I can boost you up." I watched, breath held, as my daughter climbed awkwardly through the kitchen window I'd deliberately left unlatched. Her suit snagged on the frame, and for a moment she looked like a burglar breaking into someone else's house, which I supposed was exactly what she was doing now. Seconds later, the front door opened from inside, and Mark stepped in with their luggage. Both of them froze when they saw the envelope taped at eye level on the door. Caitlin's hand trembled as she tore it free. I leaned forward in my chair, heart hammering, as she opened the letter I had written with such careful precision. Her eyes skimmed my words, her face changing with each line. Confusion, shock, anger, then horror. "He sold the house," she whispered, her voice rising. "He actually sold it." Mark snatched the letter from her hands, reading it again as if sheer willpower might change the meaning. His face hardened. "Unbelievable. The old man played us. $890,000. Caitlin's voice cracked, tears streaking her face. "That money was supposed to be our future." "Our future," Mark shot back, his calm, dutiful son-in-law act dissolving. "This is your father, Caitlin. You should have handled this better." "My fault?" she screamed. "You're the one who said he was a burden. You pushed for the nursing home." "Well, he was a burden," Mark snapped, "and now look what he's done. We're homeless. Our lease expires next week." The bitter irony was almost too perfect. There they stood, arguing about being homeless in the very house they'd tried to steal from me. "Call a lawyer," Caitlin said, her voice rising with desperation. "There has to be something we can do." "With what money?" Mark shot back, laughing bitterly. "I lost my job 6 months ago, remember? Your salary barely covers our car payments." Her face drained of color. "You told me you were consulting." "That was a lie," he shouted. "No firm is hiring someone with a termination on record." I watched my daughter's face shatter as reality finally settled in. No house, no inheritance, no savings. And now, no husband she could trust. "How could he be so cruel?" she whispered, meaning me. Mark didn't flinch. "The same way we were cruel when we planned to lock him up and take his money. Face it, Caitlin, the old man was smarter than both of us." Through the camera, I saw them slump into my old furniture, defeated. Caitlin buried her face in her hands, while Mark sat silent, staring at the letter like it was a verdict. I turned off the feed. I'd seen enough. I walked to my kitchen, opened the bottle of Maria's favorite wine, a 2018 Bordeaux we had saved for an anniversary that never came, and poured a glass. I raised it toward her picture. "To you, my love, justice served." The wine tasted like victory, rich and dark. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Almost certainly Caitlin, trying to beg, bargain, or threaten. I deleted it without even opening it, then powered the phone off completely. When I looked out the window, the Denver skyline was painted gold by the setting sun. Somewhere out there, my daughter and her husband were learning that the man they had dismissed as a burden was capable of far more than they ever imagined. For the first time since Maria's death, I felt free, truly free. My life, my choices, my future, stretched before me like an open road. Arthur Carter had walked away from the ashes of his old life, and he wasn't coming back. I sat there for a long time after they drove away, the house quieter than it had ever been. Not the soft, warm quiet Ellen used to create, the kind filled with the smell of fresh coffee and the faint hum of the dishwasher, but a hollow, ringing quiet, like a church after the congregation has left. My hands were still resting on the table where all the bills, the tuition receipts, and the wedding invoices had once been spread out like trophies of sacrifice. I stared at the grain of the wood until it blurred. I thought about every overtime shift, every missed birthday, every night I came home too tired to sit with Caitlin and watch cartoons because I was saving for her future. I thought about Ellen's hands on my shoulders, about the way she would whisper, "Roy, you're working yourself to death." She was right. I worked myself to death, just not the kind of death anyone mourns. When I sold this house, I didn't just sell 4 walls and a roof. I sold 20 years of my life, 20 years of grit under my nails and blood in my boots. I sold the place where I thought I was building a future for my daughter, where I thought I was teaching her what it meant to fight for something bigger than yourself. But somewhere along the way, the lesson got lost. Maybe I gave her too much. Maybe I taught her that everything had a price, and that if she cried hard enough, her father would find a way to pay it. Do you know what the cruelest part is? I don't even hate her. I wish I did. Hate would be easier. Hate would give me somewhere to put all of this hurt. But all I feel is empty. Not angry, not vengeful, just hollow, like the house she'll never walk into again. Maybe someday she'll understand what this house meant. Maybe one day she'll stand in a kitchen of her own, running her hands over a table where she's kept too many receipts and too many regrets, and she'll think about me. She'll think about how her father worked himself raw to give her everything she asked for, and how it still wasn't enough. Until then, the keys are gone, the doors are locked, and the man who lived here is gone too. Whoever Roy was, the father, the provider, the dreamer, he's not coming back.